3 lanes are closed.
Began the press conference by saying we are opening up the country. We have to do that. Our country has suffered. All governors will have a phased and deliberate approach. The strategy will be based on hard, verifiable data, the president said. Now, the president went on to say that federal guidelines will basically allow for a 3-phase reopening. Obviously, it's very much a part of the governors and what they intend to do. But then he turned things over to Dr. Birx, who was kind of laying out this gatekeeping criteria. The first phase, a number of cases would have to actually test at a range that would indicate some decline in the number of tested. So you would have to kind of get into the total gatekeeping capacity even before you would be allowed to participate in phase 1. Let me bring in Brian Curtis, who's in Hong Kong. He was also listening. Anything that you'd like to highlight before we bring in our Bloomberg reporter?
Well, it's just those 3 phases and the gating. That was the center of this. And as you laid out very well, though, you need this downward trajectory of cases over 14 days. And then they really need to, each state needs to have the healthcare capacity. There's no way that a state is going to open up if basically all the beds in hospitals in the state are occupied. So that's a really big part of it, too. And then this concept of overall preparedness. And the testing ramping up. We heard from the Vice President that we expect to have had 5 million by the end of April. That's pretty exciting and pretty interesting, Doug.
Yeah, so phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, the first phase, the number of cases, positive test reports. Dr. Birx kind of likened this to what was going on with the CDC surveying of various flu outbreaks. So if you have some kind of flu-like or COVID-like symptom in a state or region, that needs to be ascertained, tested, and as you said, Brian, when you aggregate everything together, the trend must be downward. The robust testing program, Dr. Birx said, actually the U.S. across the labs that are available now has the weekly capacity to conduct a million tests. Let's bring in Bloomberg White House reporter Mario Parker, who has been listening to the press conference. We were talking earlier before the briefing, Mario, about what we were likely to hear. Really no surprises there, were there?
You okay? I think that's the headline indeed. That,
you okay?
What kind of leaked out of the White House earlier today in terms of the guidelines, they pretty much followed the talking points to a T. The president didn't reveal a whole lot new on that front.
I think one thing that's interesting about this is we are seeing some examples of some clusters, and we heard only very briefly from the CDC director, Robert Redfield, that we, meaning the United States, can contain and isolate outbreaks. But if you look at South Dakota and the Smithfield Foods plant there with more than 600 cases just popped up really in a matter of days. And then I'd like to highlight the story of Singapore, Mario, because Singapore was held up for a while as a model, but then 728 new infections yesterday alone, 447 the day before. This is because you find new areas where people are in very close proximity. In Singapore's case, it's a lot of the domestic helpers. So it's going to be very tricky.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And Dr. Birx kind of alluded to that some of her comments in terms of state preparedness and moving from phase to phase. One of the qualifications is to be able to quickly detect, as you mentioned, one of those emerging hotspots or, like into a fire breaking out and immediately respond to that, having the resources to respond to that without overextending the hospital's capacity in some of those areas. So that is indeed one of the qualifications in getting things started. That's a really good point.
Yeah, she did say that phase 2, in order to kind of reach that phase, there has to be no evidence of any rebound in cases, and then if you were successfully able to clear that gate, that further loosening of restrictions would apply. And she went on to really kind of focus on tracking asymptomatic cases by surveillance, really being on guard for any and the slightest outbreak. This takes us back to the issue of testing, doesn't it?
It does take us back to that issue, and the president
Oops.